Good evening. Let's get it started. We're doing it live right here at Yabba Dabba Doo Time, heading into the weekend, the 5 o'clock hour in Los Angeles. Good evening to you. This is Mottek On Money, 5 nights a week for you, live on the air here in 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. At 6 o'clock, stay tuned for the 790 KBC News Blitz with our legal eagle, Royal Oaks. Looks like stocks wrapped up the week with a rally today. And in fact, that jobs report that came out this morning was a blockbuster. Surge in jobs created, along with the slowdown in wage pressures, perking up the mood on Wall Street. The latest report showed the economy added 336,000 jobs in September, and that blew past analysts' expectations for 170,000 new jobs. The report also said gains in August and July were revised higher. Other details from that report were slightly more favorable as well. For example, average hourly wages rose just 0.2% in September, bringing the 12-month rate of change through September to 4.2%. That was slower than the previous month's year-over-year rate of 4.3%. We did see some reaction in the bond market. The yield on the 10-year note moving higher today to 4.78%, and the yield on the 30-year note hit the highest we've seen since 2007. The Dow came in for a closing gain of 288 points. The S&P 500 moved up 50. The Nasdaq gained 211. The Dow falling for the third week in a row. The S&P 500 snapped a 4-week losing streak today, and the Nasdaq saw back-to-back weekly gains. Looks like the Dow was down 0.3% for the week. The S&P 500 up 0.5%, and the Nasdaq gained 1.6% for the week. Well, the hot labor summer is now extended into a hot labor autumn, with the actors still on the picket lines of the major studios here in Hollywood. If you've been driving around today, you've probably seen them. After a slow but steady restart of talks on a new contract, negotiations between SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union, and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the movie studios are expected to ramp up and explore deeper issues and sticking points in the bargaining deal, according to 3 insiders with knowledge of the studio side of the negotiations, talking to The Wrap today. Of course, we're following that story closely. Gas prices still stubbornly high here in Southern California, at or near record highs at a lot of stations. Oil, those come down this week, dramatically so, down nearly 9% this week. Crude oil futures did end the day higher today by 48 cents to $82.79 a barrel, but down 8.8% for the week. Brent crude in London, the international benchmark, moved up by 51 cents to $84.58 a barrel. It's down 8.3% for the week. Somebody say McDonald's investors suffering through the worst weekly losing stretch in 4 years. This amid increasing concerns that the recent surge in interest rates will crimp consumer spending. McDonald's stock down 1.4% today, on track for its lowest close since October of 2022. An historic week in Washington with the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, ousted, the first time in U.S. history that the position of Speaker of the House was vacated. The Department of Justice, meanwhile, is breaking its silence over the theft of thousands of Americans' private tax files. We'll get an update from Washington tonight from leading taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform, who will be joining me live later this hour. It's the L.A. real estate story that's getting attention around the world. Have you heard about this? And it turns out an L.A. law is protecting an Airbnb guest living in Brentwood in a rental there. Been there for more than a year without paying rent. Other incidents of so-called squatting are now being reported. We'll get an update on what's happening out there in the L.A. rental world with Daniel YUKELSON, the executive director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, who will also be joining us live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, to wrap up the week and look ahead to the next week as we get into the month of October here. Joining us live now, investment expert Brian Perry, chief investment strategist and portfolio manager at Mint Asset Management at mintassetmanagement.com, also author of the 25% Cash Machine. Brian, thanks very much for taking the call here. Dramatic week, a lot of moving parts here, but mostly higher here in that better than expected jobs report. Give us your assessment of what we got here.
Well, the headline numbers are always great to look at, Frank, and the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, does a fantastic job of painting the tape, as we like to call it in the business. Actually, the jobs report was not as healthy as thought when you start looking under the hood. A deeper read shows that 96,000 of these jobs were leisure and hospitality. We're talking like bartenders and working in restaurants and working in hotels and things like that. The lowest paying hourly wage jobs. So that's not great from the standpoint of the type of work that to keep up with inflation. 73,000 jobs were government added jobs, added to state, local, and federal jobs. really the government shouldn't be adding that many people unless we're probably starting a war. It just seems like that's an enormous amount of job growth for government. Normally they average about 20 to 30,000 jobs a month. Healthcare was 41,000 jobs. That would be attributed certainly to the aging of America. We need a lot more healthcare workers to manage that issue. And only 29,000 were professional and scientific technology jobs. So those are the best paying jobs, but the smallest are and social assistance, which is just taking care of people, counselors, all that type of thing, intervention. So what happens here is you also had a huge loss of full-time jobs, one of the biggest on record, and a huge spike in part-time jobs and second jobs. In fact, there's more people on record than ever before that are holding down two jobs in order to make their bills. So the takeaway from this was that bond yields spiked in the morning, and then they started fading in the afternoon as people started to get a deeper read into these numbers and see what it really means. And you had with also the probability on with the Fed futures looking like they, as of this morning, it looked like a November rate hike is on the table, maybe another one in December, but that started also reversing itself in the middle of the day. So we saw an actual 10% swing in that to where now the probability of the Fed staying pat at the November 1st meeting is 89% probability. And where that was just recently, only 67% just a week ago. So you've got the bond futures traders are like, man, this jobs report is not as healthy as everybody talked about, and therefore when we look at that with the inflation numbers still holding fairly steady, with food and energy still being sticky, I think that's probably an accurate read by the futures traders. And so therefore we saw yields back off and stocks just took off. A lot of short covering here. This S&P held the 200-day moving average, which was really nice to see, and that really caused some knock-on buying from all directions here. And also you've had some other big news hit the tape here. This big merger by Exxon buying Pioneer Natural Resources for $60 billion. That's a big purchase. But look for the government to really try to block that merger. It puts Exxon in a very big position there to controlling a big part of the Permian Basin. But that also follows the Cisco purchase of Splunk. So we're getting some M&A deal flow here, large ticket deal flow, which is important to see in a market that has really been devoid of that kind of deal making here for many months, and if not over a year and a half. Other big things going on in the week is the big topic is weight loss. We've seen a number of articles and interviews and presentations on Novo Nordisk's big two drugs here, Ozempic and Wegovy, which are both made by Novo. NVO is the symbol there. This comes in the midst of the government also trying to renegotiate drug prices for Medicare. So you had the drug stocks pulling back, and then you have this whole weight loss thing going forward for Novo because they make insulin also. And so for people that want to play the weight loss drug trend, where Lilly has been the leader in this so far with their injectable, they will have a pill form is what they're thinking here sometime later this year. Lilly made a huge run from 300 to 550. Novo may make a similar kind of run here over the next year and a half. They're spending $4 billion to expand their weight loss drug production 24/7. Now, at the same time, there's reports of hundreds of thousands of people having digestive problems with these particular weight loss drugs all around the world. So this all still has to be worked out, and you get the second, third versions of these types of drugs as they come along. But the point is, it's a big deal. A lot of people are starting to take it seriously, and it's really impacting a lot of the food and restaurant stocks here. Part of what you said with McDonald's is true about input costs, but another part is people are just going to stop going through the drive-thru as much if they're on the weight loss drugs. So you saw things like McDonald's, whether it was QSR, which owns Burger King, and Pepsi, snack foods, Coke, Walmart. Walmart made a comment that today that they're seeing basket loads are starting to become reduced in their grocery section. Similar type of situation there. Stock got hit. Kroger, another one. So those are stocks that look like you should probably avoid those for the time being here. Another big cyber attack here this week. Clorox got hit, and so that's been very bullish here for the cybersecurity stocks like Palo Alto Networks, CrowdStrike, and Zscaler, which all had very strong advances. So a lot of things going on, Frank, that are catalysts for a number of sectors this week. Downside catalyst certainly was oil taking that big hit. But, in general, it's really refreshing to be here on your show today, being able to talk about a strong close.
Absolutely. Bryan Perry, investment expert with Mint Asset Management. I was in the In-N-Out Burger drive-through line earlier today, by the way. So we are watching McDonald's, certainly, and what's happening there. And it's hard to ignore, what happened with oil. And gosh, gas prices here, Brian, are near record highs. They're coming down like a feather after shooting up like a rocket. As we saw oil hover above $90 a barrel, now it's 82 and change here. And the oil names, of course, had that big rally. You noted that ExxonMobil deal reportedly near to buy Pioneer Natural Resources for about $60 billion. We see ExxonMobil stock falling a bit today, while Pioneer Natural Resources, PXD, moving higher. What are your thoughts about the oil patch here and the big oil names and where oil goes from here?
Well, you're starting to see a rotation into this week here with this oil pullback here, and that's because there's no further production cuts coming out of Russia and OPEC plus, and that started to hit the market here a bit because China really has had a slow start coming out of this whole COVID experience. The rotation, what I saw the last couple of days was in the natural gas, which is up around $3 per MCF now. So we're starting to enter the winter months now, where things are going to start to get chilly around the country here. No one knows if it's going to be a temperate winter or a hardcore winter, but we are seeing the natural gas stocks push higher, and so natural gas is also the source of which we make liquefied natural gas that we send overseas to all these markets that require that, whether it's Europe or Asia and down in South America. So I'm seeing the natural gas trade is on. And it's just a matter of, you look for rotation in the market, money flows, and people were taking some money off of oil, but you didn't see the natural gas stocks pull back, and therefore they've been on the receiving end of those funds that still want to be in the fossil fuel sector, but be in the clean, green, natural gas sector for the time being, because we are coming into the cold months. And I think that's a pretty good-looking trade here, given the fact that they haven't made a big advance like oil did earlier.
All right, at this point, Bryan Perry, where are you putting money now and/or taking it off the table?
Well, you look for things that don't have a lot of capital-intensive businesses here, and because the cost of capital is very expensive right now to put in plants and equipment, that kind of thing, with the cost of borrowing. So software companies are really in the limelight, I believe, and one of them is certainly Autodesk, ADSK, which has the AI edge on CAD/CAM computing, computer-aided design for building everything from structures, bridges, roads, train stations, subways, waterways, you name it, harbors. And so with the infrastructure bill kicking in here, they're going to be on the big receiving end with the engineers all boosting their workloads around the world for these types of projects, but mainly in the U.S. I'm buying some Applied Materials in here. They're the 800-pound gorilla in the chip equipment space here. They had fabulous numbers here. They raised their guidance. Stock was 155. It's currently trading at 140. I think that looks good down here. I started picking away at Amazon here today, too. That's down from 140 to 128. They're in the middle of this FTC trial, which I think is going to play out for many months. But in the middle of that, you should get a boomer set of earnings here out of the company here that'll be led by AWS, their data center cloud computing business. Salesforce.com, that was up to 230, back down to 207 here. Held this 200-day moving average, looks really good. I like that here. They beat their numbers and raised guidance. And Uber Technologies, Frank, this ride sharing around the world is picking up, and they're also doing a lot of delivery here. Especially they'll pick up your package too from your house and take it to FedEx or UPS. They started that service here just recently, so that's another arm of their business that looks good. And then Microsoft here is interesting. They are going to be launching an AI chip, apparently. That's rumored today that they're going to launch a chip here next month, possibly, that'll rival what they need from NVIDIA. So that's an interesting, we'll see how that plays out, if that really has a lot of traction. And then one stock that's just leading the way is Alphabet Google, because their Gemini AI project, which is a multiple large language models, is soon going to catch up with ChatGPT in its own way. So that stock's breaking back up toward the high of the year, and that looks good. Again, I still like Visa, and I still like Hilton here for coming into the winter travel season here. Technically, it looks great exposure around the world. And then coming off, Frank, as I mentioned, all these food-related stocks look like that's the obvious one to take off for the week.
Excellent. I'll have to Google that one up that you mentioned. And, of course, we got the Writers Guild with a deal with the producers, the movie studios, and now we're waiting some sort of a deal that could be hashed out between the actors and the studios. What about the media names here at this point, Brian?
It's a hard one to call. I mean, it seems like the providers of the services are still going to be okay. I'm looking at Netflix here. I mean, it started to look like it was going to get out of bed here, and then it's just holding that 200-day down here. It had a good day today, up 9 points here at 381. Take a look at that, because when it does come, when there's any whiff of this strike really coming around and resolving itself here, I think Netflix is going to really move higher here. Everybody's talking Disney, but I like Netflix better just as a pure content play. And beyond that, Liberty Media, LBTYA, and there's 3 or 4 Liberty Medias out there. They provide a lot of communications for media out there, so that's more of what you call a nuts and bolts play, or a shovels and picks type play. And then Comcast is another one here, which has done well here recently here for a more conservative play for those that are looking for media that has cable operations, as well as they do install stuff like Infinity, where they offer high-speed services for businesses. So I think those are CMCSA is a symbol there. I think that's pretty good. But you know what, Frank? One thing that's for sure, I don't think the line at In-N-Out Burger is ever going to get short. I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Always
no, you're absolutely right about that. You're a very wise man to point that out. Absolutely. Now, of course, also on the labor front, the United Auto Workers Union continuing its strike against the Big Three. Looks like they've held off on additional strikes against auto plants in Detroit, citing GM's unexpected willingness to allow workers at joint venture battery plants to be covered by union contracts. So it looks like GM stock had a rough week. What about the auto names here in the face of this ongoing strike?
There's a talk that they actually may shut down or move some of their operations in their high profitable SUV plants, either to offshore those or just or the strikers may try to shut those down. This is not working out. It's just, and they want a 30% pay hike here for these battery plants, which is really hard to do, because you can make these. The workers in South Korea will make these batteries for $15 an hour, and these workers want $45 an hour. So it's I don't know where this is going to go, Frank. So I think it's going to still be out there for a while. The big winners in this, there's 2 winners here. One is Tesla, and that's been acting pretty good of late here, and the other is really Toyota Motor. Which is that's been on. It had a huge run here when the strike started. It was 150, ran up to 195. It's pulled back here to 170. I think that people should take a look at TM, Toyota Motor, as a major beneficiary. Plus, they arguably make the best cars in the world.
Brian Perry, investment expert, chief investment strategist, and portfolio manager at Mint Asset Management at mintassetmanagement.com, and also author of the 25% Cash Machine. Brian, thank you very much for taking the call. When you get back out this way, we'll definitely go to In-N-Out Burger, and we'll eat in the car.
Looking for that. Looking forward to that. Thanks, Frank. Have a great weekend.
You got it, Brian. Thank you very much for the call this evening. This is Mottek On Money, 790 KABC. Friends, the future of joint pain relief is here. It's called QC Kinetics, Advanced Regenerative Medicine. It's amazing stuff. Frank Mottek here. You've been told maybe steroids or surgery are your only options? Well, don't be so fast. Get a second opinion and learn more about how you can harness your body's own healing agents to attack that joint pain. I'm talking lasting relief. QC Kinetics doesn't mask the pain. These treatments go right to the root of the problem, using concentrated healing properties placed directly in your joint to restore and repair that damaged joint tissue. Imagine living your life this fall with no more pain in your knees, hips, shoulders, or back. No drugs, no surgery, no downtime. Life's about motion, and QC Kinetics is giving people their lives back with these all-natural treatments. Call QC Kinetics for a free consultation, the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. QC Kinetics, locations in Glendale, the city of Orange, Mission Viejo, and now also in Costa Mesa. Call 213-997-PAIN, 213-997-PAIN. Again, that's 213-997-PAIN. All this week, KABC has your chance to win a relax and rejuvenate getaway to Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Spa, which includes 2-night stay at Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino. Let's get it started. Dinner at Edge Steakhouse and spa credit at Serenity Spa. Right now, be caller 9. at 1-888-795-2222. That's 1-888-795-2222 to win a relax and rejuvenate getaway to Westgate, Las Vegas, resort and spa, home of the legendary Vegas Fun. Must be at least 21 to win. Prizes provided by Westgate, Las Vegas. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KABC. We have a winner today on Wall Street with the Dow up 288 points, settling at 33,407. The S&P 500 moved up 50 to finish at 4308, and the NASDAQ wrapped up the week with a gain of 211 points at 13,431. Markets getting a lift on what was viewed as a better-than-expected jobs report out first thing this morning. We did see the Dow slip 0.3% for the week. The S&P 500 managed a gain of 0.5% for the week, and the NASDAQ gained 1.6% for the week. The Dow, by the way, down for the third week in a row, while the S&P 500 managed to snap a 4-week losing streak today, and the NASDAQ saw back-to-back weekly gains. That jobs report out today showed the economy added 336,000 jobs in September. That blew past analysts' expectations of 170,000 new jobs. In the bond market, we see the yield on the 30-year note hitting the highest seen since 2007. Bond yield's a big story this week, hitting the highest basically since 2007, impacting fixed-rate mortgage rates, which are now at 23-year highs. Taking a look at one of the movers today as part of a big deal that's being reported in the oil patch. Shares of Pioneer Natural Resources jumping 10.5% following a report in the Wall Street Journal that ExxonMobil is closing in on a deal to buy that Texan shale driller for about $60 billion. ExxonMobil stock, which has been hitting record highs lately, pulled back 1.7% on that report. And now the latest news for you right here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. Good evening. What a week, an historic week in Washington for sure, with the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, the California Republican, ousted, the first time in U.S. history that the position of Speaker of the House was vacated. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice breaking its silence now over the theft of thousands of American private tax files. We'll get an update on all this now, live from the leading taxpayer advocate, Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover Norquist, thank you very much for taking the call here, and appreciate your ringside seat there in Washington and keeping us well-informed about what's happening. First of all, got to ask you about this historic vote this week, ousting the Speaker of the House.
Well, I think it's a big mistake. The House Republicans had come up with a proposal to cut spending 8% to begin rebuilding the wall on the southern border. And a group of 8 people blew it up, and because they had a theory that one could do better somehow. And I'm not sure that's accurate. So it was, I think it's a big mistake. Mr. McCarthy was doing a good job. All of the investigations that were going on can now be interrupted. And McCarthy had made that possible. All the budget work that was put together to get us ready to go to battle with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president, all blown up. So it's very frustrating to be in the minority, but that doesn't mean you're not responsible for working. And some people would rather do anything other than work.
On there live with Grover Norquist, and given what's going on there with the Speaker's position now being vacated, what about a possible government shutdown now, which was just averted last weekend, coming up on another one here?
Well, I think they will be able to avert it. At the end of the day, the government never really shuts down. They send people home who are not necessary at that time, and they get paid for the time they missed afterwards. So it's happened many, many times. It's been sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes with divided government. Sometimes when the Democrats had all 3 branches of government, they still had a shutdown because people couldn't quite agree. So it's a lot of drama. One would prefer to get your homework done on time, but if you shut down for a day or a week or two, it does not mean Social Security checks don't go out. They do.
Is President Trump going to be the new speaker? What's the buzz there in Washington?
Technically, one could appoint anybody. The Republicans all got together, get a majority of the legislature, and you could pick anybody. You don't. I think you have to be a citizen, but you don't have to be a member of Congress. In point of fact, there are 2, 3 people running, but all members of Congress. One of them will get picked, Mr. Hearn out of Oklahoma, and our friend Scalise from Louisiana, and Ohio.
Jim Jordan.
Is the other guy. Jim Jordan in Ohio. So all three, any of those three would be fine.
And it looks like President Trump is endorsing Jim Jordan.
Yeah, I've endorsed Scalise, so we'll see whether President Trump or I win.
On the Air Live with Grover Norquist. Now turning to something you've been watching for us, and I see on your website you're reporting about this. The Department of Justice breaking its silence over the theft of thousands of Americans' taxpayers' private files. So what about this, and what is the latest on that story?
This is a story going on for more than 2 years now. They finally admitted back in 2021 that thousands and thousands of IRS files, IRS audits had been stolen and handed to a left-wing political group. Janet Yellen got up and said, well, we have no reason to think it was an IRS person. Well, turns out we now know it was an IRS contract hire. They have a lot of contract hires because they don't have the skill in the employees. There's a contractor who worked there for like at least 3 years. And during those 3 years, he went around stealing stuff. He's the guy who stole, reportedly, according to the government, stole Trump's tax return and gave it to this left-wing group. And then the same thing with thousands of others. Bloomberg, who had the audacity to run against Biden, was selected as one of the people that they stole his stuff and handed it out like candy. And for 2 years, the government is stonewalled. Asked, what's happening? They said, oh, we don't know. Look, to have access to thousands and thousands of IRS documents, you had to be at the center of the spider's web. You can't access through one portal and get everything. So they knew who this was a long time ago. And worse, when they announced it, they did it on Friday night, so to kill the story, not to man up and tell people what happened, but to drop it there. There's been no further conversation about it. Why isn't Biden expressing his outrage at the betrayal by the IRS? If the IRS can't keep your tax data secret, they shouldn't have any. And this IRS actually wants to do your taxes for you, meaning they have to have all your data, all your receipts, everything you pile up when you do your taxes. The IRS will have to have that to do your taxes for you, and they'll share it with anyone they want to, whenever they want to. And the guy who broke the law to do it, that's 5 years go to jail for every one of those tax returns. They're only charging him with one count. Should be several thousand counts, which would be 5,000-10,000 years in jail. But they're going to do one, which makes you wonder why they're taking this so unseriously.
And you raised a great question in your headline here. Why is the thief only being charged with a single count when he committed thousands of crimes? So what is the answer to that?
Well, it smells like the way Hunter Biden was charged. They waited until certain crimes had passed their due date, and he couldn't be charged with them. And he was undercharged. They tried to cut a deal with, a gun crime is a significant go-to-jail time, and they wanted to barter that down. They're not putting much pressure on this guy. I guess they don't want him to talk.
Anything else that taxpayers should be aware of there that you're watching now in Washington?
Sure. Nikki Haley, one of the presidential candidates, just signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, which is good news. Each of the candidates is coming forward and saying, you know what, we're never raising taxes. Chris Christie did it a while ago. So I think they'll all sign eventually, but just yesterday, Nikki Haley, who signed it as a governor in South Carolina. She did a good job. She did not allow any tax increases to go through, and she made the same commitment at the presidential level.
Well, Grover, thank you very much for taking the call tonight and keeping us well informed of what's happening there. That is taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, have a great weekend, and thanks again for taking the call this evening.
Thank you.
Right out to the freeways we go now, here on 790 KABC. Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby, ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in this process. The team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. It's Friday night, and the L.A. real estate story that people are talking about around the world at this point. And an L.A. law, it turns out, is protecting an Airbnb guest living at a Brentwood rental for more than a year, and he's not been paying rent. Other incidents of so-called squatting are being reported in the Los Angeles area. Let's get an update now on what's happening in the L.A. rental world with Daniel YUKELSON, the executive director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. Daniel YUKELSON, thank you very much for coming to the line. And what's your reaction to this person in Brentwood who's been living in a place for more than a year without paying rent there?
Well, thanks for having me on again, Frank. Unfortunately, this is really nothing new for people that own property. They really need to be very, very careful. This squatter thing has been going on quite extensively. You may remember up in Oakland, there was the Moms for Housing that took over a bunch of empty homes. And there's a story about a handyman who was trying to lease out his mom's home after she had passed away. And the real estate agents weren't able to get inside the house because squatters had set themselves up in there with all their furniture. And he literally had to go there with guns and kick these people out. And he gave them an ultimatum: if you're not out by tonight, I'm going to take action and remove you. And so, when people are renting their places, if they're empty, they really need to be very careful because squatters are moving in, and there's tons of protections that they have in California. Police just don't want to deal with this stuff because police look at it as a civil matter. The people that are squatting in a property are claiming that they have a legal right to be there, and police don't want to get mixed up in this whole thing. And for an owner, it could take anywhere up to 6 months to eventually evict somebody for something like this.
Or longer.
Unfortunately, yeah, or longer. And unfortunately, the case of this Brentwood gentleman who, father of young kids, he's kind of stuck with this woman because he actually went through the process of renting to her. And unfortunately, she lasted there as a renter for more than 6 months. And so now all these crazy Los Angeles City laws that condone this criminal activity of this woman who's been living in his guest house protect her. And the city of LA is not going to help this poor person. And he's kind of stuck with somebody who is, combating with him on a day-to-day basis. It's the most ridiculous thing. She could stay there, as long as he wants. And, we have a housing shortage here in California. And these accessory units that people have on their properties are great ways to help house people and house them cheaply. And nobody's going to do this if, they're going to get stuck in these types of situations. And this person who's been using this accessory unit is just purely taking advantage of this poor property owner. And he's stuck dealing with somebody, and it's probably going to cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars to eventually get rid of this person. People who are building accessory dwelling units today in California, and the state legislature has been pushing for people to provide more housing and telling people and making the laws easier to build these units. You got to beware, and you better know the laws. And so either you need to consult with an attorney or join some association like ours, like the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, to explain exactly what the rules are so you don't get yourself into trouble like this poor gentleman did by allowing this person to stay over for 6 months.
Isn't that something else? So this doctor who owns the place renting out to a lady, and the lady's attorney telling the L.A. Times that she was not required to pay rent because the city had never approved the unit for occupancy and that its shower was constructed without a permit. So what is the law here that is creating the situation?
Well, it's just a technicality. It's not what's considered a legal unit. It's what we call a bootleg unit. It's perfectly safe to live in. There's many of them throughout the city of Los Angeles. And unfortunately, when tenants get hooked up with attorneys, they can just not stop paying rent and, stick the property owner with hundreds of thousands of dollars of bills. Technically, under LA city law, you're not allowed to rent a unit unless it's a legal unit. And there's many of these. Unfortunately, the city looks the other way with all the people who are living on the streets in these rundown RVs or living on vacant lots and tents. Those seem to be perfectly legal. Yet somebody who has a unit, something that was constructed, in a manner that's safe, and may have not gotten all the permits to install an oven or a bathroom in one of these accessory units, they get in trouble for that. Yet the city allows homeless people to exploit our streets and, all of our vacant areas, our parks, and everything else that goes with it. Those certainly are not habitable conditions. Those are not safe conditions. But this poor doctor that built an accessory unit on their property, I'm sure it's a beautiful, perfectly safe place to stay, just it's missing a couple of permits. And, he's, getting really hurt by it. It's unfortunate.
Can you imagine what's going on there? Don't know if they're locking horns every day or what. It sounds like a real nightmare.
Oh, it's a complete nightmare. It really is. But, as I said, it's a very common occurrence. And it costs people that own property, if you get, one of these squatters at your property, it costs tens of thousands of dollars to deal with the issue. There was another issue down in Torrance where a bunch of squatters took over a property that somebody had inherited from their mother who passed away, and they show up there and there's people living on the property that they don't know about. Police won't do anything about it, and it costs this person about $50,000-$60,000 to eventually evict them.
Isn't that something
laws need to change?
Hearing more about these kind of situations on top of all the other huge issues that we've been talking about for the past couple of years.
Oh, it's terrible. It's not worth owning property in a lot of cases. There's just no respect. And, cities like Los Angeles are literally becoming third world countries under this Karen Bass administration. It's terrible. It really is bad. There needs to be more people encouraged to be in the property rental business rather than, endure the pain and suffering that they've been put under because of these crazy city of LA laws. They're totally backwards.
Are you getting any court relief? Any updates on the court action you've taken?
Frank, invite me back in October. I'll be able to give you some updates. We have some hearings coming up in October, and hopefully we will be making quite a bit of progress then.
Can you believe it's October already? Yeah, this year has flown by.
Middle of October. We have hearings this month. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel YUKELSON, thank you very much for that important update tonight, and look forward to speaking with you very soon again. That's the Executive Director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, Daniel YUKELSON, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with our legal eagle, Royal Oaks. He'll be joining you next. And I'll be back again Monday for the Mottek On Money program. You can also bring up the Mottek On Money podcast on demand at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Have a great weekend. This is Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
In 1995, veteran police officer Michael Chappell was convicted of armed robbery and murder and has spent the past 30 years in prison. The true crime podcast, In the Land of Lies, explores the untold side to this story, one that could prove Michael Chappell is actually innocent. See why people are calling In the Land of Lies incredible, phenomenal, and a must-hear podcast. Binge the entire series now, and new episodes are coming soon. Imperative Entertainment presents In the Land of Lies. Get the podcast wherever you listen.